Hello, and welcome to another episode of Intune.training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune, the Steve and Adam Show, with Jake, the executive assistant. What's up, boys?
Not much, Adam. How about yourself?
Just hanging out another Friday night, ready to throw down some cool Intune stuff. You guys ready?
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get there.
This one's going to be amazing. Hey, Steve, what are we talking about?
Role-based access control.
Is that the one? All right, let me get the right
slides.
So. Here we go. Role-based access control in Microsoft Intune. So what is role-based access control, Steve?
It's where we can sit there and delegate access to a certain subset of staff, access to part of the platform or all of the platform.
Sounds right. And so that's...
Adam's really surprised I came back with that scientific answer there.
I was just really expecting you to just read the first paragraph off the page. That's all. I was really surprised that you went off on your own. That was good.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. So what it really means is that for people like your executive assistant, you don't want them to have as many rights and roles in your system. You can delegate specific authority to them. And so we want them to have some rights, but not all the rights. So that's what role-based access control is going to do for us. Now, if you used Config Manager for any period of time, you've probably set up RBAC in there as well. RBAC, the abbreviation for role-based access control, just in case. So affectionately known as RBAC, we're going to talk about how to do things that you're probably familiar with already in other platforms in Intune. So the feel like this one is one of those, gets a little bit tricky because the terminology is different, and there are these scopes and roles and groups and things, and trying to understand where all those go is a little bit tricky. I know for me it has been, just trying to, once you get it, it's really straightforward, but I don't know, I'm a little slow. So the first thing to at least talk about is over on the docs, you can go through and look at the built-in custom roles, which I was just slowly scrolling through as I talk with my mouse. I don't know if you guys have noticed. If you see me in person, I talk with my hands a lot, and so I'm talking with my mouse. I need to stop. But they have built-in roles that we'll look at in a minute, and so you can come here and read a definition of what those do, and we'll show you in the console and how you can dig in to see what you actually get access to with those roles. We'll show you how to look at that. And one of the things I'd like to point out, though, is that by default within Active Directory, there are other roles on the Active Directory side of things that also grant you
Azure Active Directory.
Azure Active Directory. My God, sorry.
Not Active Directory. It's not going to go and leverage stuff from your on-prem. No. It's all about the cloud, Adam. AAD.
It would have helped clarify. Anyway. Sidebar. All right, so it is important to know that there is Azure roles and there are Intune roles. To get started, your first person that you're going to give rights to in Intune, you will give them the Intune administrator role within Azure, and then that delegate those.
If they don't already have global admin or associated roles.
Exactly. So if you want to specifically delegate out an Intune administrator who is not going to be a global administrator, then you would delegate out your global administrator, your Intune administrator role to that person or people or groups, preferably a group. And once you grant that right, then they have rights to then grant additional rights within the Intune roles pane that we'll go take a look at. So this is the role we're talking about. So all I did just went to Azure Active Directory, roles administrators, and Intune administrator. And so this is where we want to assign out who is going to be an Intune administrator. And at some point it will load.
We don't have any because
that's right. So we don't have any. Correct. We're all GAs, which is,
yes,
like we said, we've always said do as we say, not as we do. Right.
Yes.
So normally
we're a very small tenant, 5 people. We don't need to have granulated permissions, but in larger organizations where you need to have that granular permissions, that's where delegating out Intune administrator, global reader, and things like that will give you the permission levels that are required.
And that's actually what I have in my org. So I'm not a global administrator in my org. And so but I am an Intune administrator, plus I have additional Azure rights to things that I need. And that's great because that protects me, that protects the organization. That means that I have to go and work with someone who's responsible for the other areas before I start turning things on. And so that's a good delegation of authority, right? Basic.
And the other couple of things that I'll highlight here is where it says eligible assignments. This is where you can go and see really quickly what's set up for PIM, so privileged identity management, which we've gone over previously. And then you've also got this expired, which will say these permissions are no longer eligible for this staff member.
So what you will notice in this while we're here is that Jake is not in as a global administrator or an Intune administrator. And that's by design for the purpose of this demonstration. And he'll have to earn back his global admins when we're done. So
a third time he's got to earn back.
That's right. We've done this before. So once you get done with that, just the thing I want to point out here is that there are roles in Active Directory that do grant read, write, and audit type access within Intune. So don't be alarmed when you give global reader and then they can go and see a bunch of stuff in Intune. So cross-reference against the list what they can access. Yeah,
security reader is
administrator versus operator. The administrator can actually administer endpoint security. We have a whole video where we talked to Matt Shadbolt about that. So that's actually really cool because you can let your security guys into your system, but just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
All right. So hopefully you got the general idea here. We want to give, you need to at least have GA or Intune administrator role to get started down this route. So then inside the endpoint portal, we'll go to the tenant administration. And you guys are, oh, stop it. All right, so we are going to tenant administration and we're going to go to roles.
Yes.
And we go to all roles.
So we've already created a group.
We're going to create our roles. Sorry, let me go. We should double check scope tags here. So we need this one first. So we want to create a scope tag first because we'll assign this in the role step next. And so we just want to create a read only, and we'll just call it read only new because, well, that's what's typed in my window here already. There we go. And then these assign scope tags to all devices in a select security group. So guys, what do we assign here? What are we putting this tag on?
All systems.
Devices. Not all. Yeah. Never mind. What a specific one.
So at a high level, we're going to sit here, and this is what has access, what the resource will have access to once you've provisioned the permissions. So Intune license is a user group, but there's the Intune Surface 6.
Yeah, that works. Right. So this is the devices that you're that will get tagged with the scope tag. So
and this is super important to call out. So if you've got geographic locations where you've got, say, a New York office, a Sydney office, and a London office, you want to delegate permission out. This is where you'd group those together. And this, you can use things like dynamic groups to create those groups to say, this computer's in this region, so therefore this admin has access to it.
Yep. Yeah. So
and each device within that group can have multiple tags as
scope tags. That's correct.
Yep. Now, what's neat here is you notice that it doesn't have a all devices scope tag here, and that's because why?
Default.
Right. So all of our devices already come with a default scope tag on them.
Yes.
Or all of our resources have the default scope tag. And that's important because you cannot scope things and then they get scoped as part of the default scoping. Here we go. So on the resource, looking at scope tags, can hit open, and we can see that it's already got the selected scope tag of default. And so I can individually add scope tags to items, but in the other location we're looking at the scopes there, we can actually assign by group level. So hopefully that, so hopefully you get where that's headed. That's what we're trying to achieve here with the role-based access, is tying users and their access to objects via scope tags. RBAC. Okay, so we've created our new read-only scope tag. We've assigned it the Surface Pro 6 group, and then we want to assign a role. Now, we could go and create a new read-only access group.
Yep.
We've got lots of groups already. Let's just reuse one of those.
We'll just randomly grab one.
Yeah, so we'll pick one as we go. So we'll do read-only new as our role name. Because
amazing that's what I completing.
Maybe you've done this before, right? Okay, so now this is the tricky bit, and it's not tricky, but there's a lot of settings here, and so
it's trial and error.
This is where you may want to figure out, okay, well, what do I need somebody to do? Well, so this week I was trying to assign myself access to enroll devices with new autopilot devices with the get Windows Autopilot info script, and I was trying to do it with a non-GA account. So I was like, all right, well, how do I permission that account? What do I need? Well, I went and looked at the docs, and turns out you have to assign all enrollment program roles to that user in order to allow them to upload a device and enroll it into the autopilot service. So that's just one example. One of the things that we also discovered here is, so if you want to give read-only access to an item, you actually have to, or any sort of access to an item, you have to at least at a minimum grant the read permission for that item as well, or else you can't see it. So you have to give them the read role when you're configuring that role. So we're going to do device configurations and what else? Device enrollment manager, read, device compliance policy. There we go. Read. That should be enough, huh, Jake?
Yep. I'd say so.
Okay. All right. So now scope tags. Now this one's neat because you don't set your scope tag here, unless, so this scope tag is actually the equivalent to the scope tag that we were just looking at on a device. So this is the scope that sets the permission for someone who can see this role and edit,
manage it,
to potentially manage the role. This is not saying that this role is assigned to these scopes.
So
this will trip you up.
This one's super important. If you're going to sit there and give permission to Jake via this process, and then you go and add the scope that Jake is assigned to this, he will be able to go in and change his permissions.
Yes. So don't, yeah. So really the guidance here is generally, you probably don't want to mess with this unless you specifically know that you want to delegate a permission to a person to manage this particular role or something. But when I first was starting with this, that really tripped me up every time. Like, what? Okay, am I done? And then what happens is you go to do the assignment, and then it's asking you for scope tags again. It's like, well, wait, what? I just did that. What's going on? So it just gets really confusing. Okay, so now we need to assign the role. So we've created it. Now we want to assign it to a person and apply it to a set of devices or objects that we want to give it to. So they're all going to be called read-only new. Probably should type some things there at some point. But okay. So now we're on the admin groups. Admin groups are the administrators assigned to this role. So anyone that you put it here are the people that this role is attached to. That this is going to give them the privilege that you just set up. So in this case, we gave it read-only to several different roles or different objects, properties. So now we get to assign it to a particular group of administrators. And so we're going to do Intune Jake user, because we know that Jake's in that. So that'll make sure that we give him permissions on that. And then the scope groups, this one is limits your scope even further. So what's going to happen is when we go to scope tags, we get to choose the devices that have the scope tag assigned to them, or the objects that have scope tags. I keep saying devices, I'm sorry. Objects, because there could be anything that has a scope tag. Yes. So we're already tagging the items that we want, but we can even scope that down further and say that you can only objects in these groups that have these tags are visible, manageable, whatever, by the admins in the admin groups. Hopefully that makes sense. So those three together create this role. So if we say that, yeah, I want Jake to have access to all devices that have these scope tags, we could do all devices. But if we say I only want him to have access to the devices at this physical location that have this scope tag, then I would then potentially put a different group here that would be more restrictive to a set of devices. So like earlier, we chose our scope. We added the Surface Pro 6 to the scope. We could limit it here and also tag it with the scope tag. Seems kind of redundant. But just as an example, that is one option that you could do. And what's great there is it also helps you limit what like the creep there of if someone manually tags an item, this still prevents that item from being viewable unless it's in this group. So it still protects that your access, if that makes sense. Hopefully we're getting it. Watch it a second time if you didn't. All right, so now we created our scope tag, so we're going to do this read only, hit next and create, and we are done. So that's it. We have now assigned the Jake user group to be able to read the following items as long as they are a member of have the tag of read only on them or are a member of the Surface group.
Yes.
Which interestingly, when you're looking at this page, it would be great if it showed you the group, because it shows these and not the group. That would be we should do a feedback on that.
And do bear in mind, it can take quite a few minutes for this to take effect on the accounts and devices.
And to that end, we may not demo it in this video if we don't have enough time to fill space.
Well, actually, so what we did, Jake should have a VM, and we set up similar access with earlier for him, so he should already have a role with that. So if you would like to share, Jake.
That out 1 second.
And make sure you zoom in your view there, please.
150 good for you guys?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, it'll do.
All right. So, like Adam had mentioned, we did create a group earlier. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, we can go to roles, and I'm going to go to my permissions. You'll notice I don't have access to actually change any of the roles. If we go to my permissions, we can see what it is that I actually have access to. So I can read device compliancy policies, configurations, all these things. I can also assign and create.
Device configurations, it's not everything.
Correct, exactly. And let's go back to devices. And actually, if we go on the overview page, you'll see that there's 24 Windows devices. I'm definitely not going to see all of those.
No.
And right now, it's just this one device. I'm going to open up that device. And you'll see that there are 2 scope tags. One of them being this test Jake scope tag that we created earlier. And I obviously am assigned access to that scope tag to see it.
Yep.
And with the permission set that we have in place currently, I can go to device configuration. Back to devices and configuration profiles. And you'll notice, go ahead.
What I'll quickly call out is you'll notice flying out at the top an error message saying the MDM authority isn't enabled. That's actually incorrect. It is enabled, but Jake doesn't have permission to read it. That's why he's seeing that error message.
The only time you should see that is when you're initially setting up your environment as an administrator, and then that goes away once you've enabled the MDM authority.
Yes.
Right. And then I will say in our tenant, we obviously have a lot more configuration profiles than just these two, but these are the two that have the correct scope tag of the things that I am allowed to see. Yep. And with the current permission set that I have, I can create a new configuration profile. I'll show you that really quick.
It's worth pointing out that the role that he's using is not just read only.
It's a bit different than the configuration we used earlier.
Sorry.
And I'm not going to even bother adding any settings, but you'll notice when we get to the scope tag section, it automatically is going to add that scope tag to it. So
what you'll see is it doesn't have the default tag there, but that's added.
Correct.
It doesn't get removed. It's just Jake doesn't have permission to see that it's there.
But it's important that Jake's tags get added, because if they don't, then once he creates the object, he can't see or manage it anymore if he doesn't have the role.
Yep.
So you'll also remember... Oh, go ahead.
No, okay.
I was going to say, you also remember that we have 2 scope tags assigned to me right now. Both got added, and I can select to remove one of them if we'd like to.
You could remove both and then say, well, I don't know what policy you're talking about, boss. It's not
exactly.
Not that I would recommend to do that. Don't go and annoy people.
But that's RBAC for you.
Yep. So there's one more piece that I missed back on the roles page that I want to show real fast. So the when you're under roles, we talked about these in the beginning, but want to show you. I told you we would actually look at these and see how you can tell what you have access to. So if you go and look in read-only operator, you can see the properties of all the things that they have. And so when you cross-reference the documents, you can say, okay, well, this is read-only operator as, okay, great. And then you come over here and see what they actually get. But then if you want to use this as your basis and say, okay, I like all of this is great, but I want a little bit more, then you can actually take that and you can duplicate that role, and then you can use that as a starting place for your new role. So I think that's a great option as well.
And obviously, when you duplicate it, you can remove or append permissions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because these are read-only. So all the built-in ones are read-only. You can't edit any of the properties in them. So you have to create a copy of them if you want to change any of the settings or add or remove anything. So definitely. So I've never actually. I was looking on the Azure side, and I was trying to look at the active assignments for Jake, and I only see the Azure roles inside of Azure.
That's correct.
But do I get the same visibility inside of Intune for his roles in Intune?
No.
Well, is there a way to see the assigned roles in Intune?
No.
Feedback.
Only with that user account.
So you have to just go into
and this is why it's super important. What you do is you target to a security group, and then you drop a user into that group, and you can actually use your own testing and validation to make sure the permissions are there.
Okay.
So when you're building
if I'm a full administrator, this is what I get. I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I just want to make sure we weren't missing it. I was, anything else, guys?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks,
Adios.
Jake.